Slovak is not as hard as you think, but it is difficult to master. Zdravím všetkých, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Slovak language. Maybe you're learning it. I've been learning it for a little over 3 years now. In that time it's been on and off, but lately I've been more consistent with it. And I wanted to do a little bit of kind of a response video, but also talk about what I think is difficult and what is easy with the language when learning it. And I wanted to do a response to another channel called Predrev, was talking about how other YouTubers had said that the Slovak language is very difficult. I was one of those channels, and I wanted to give a bit of clarification on what specifically I think is difficult and actually what parts of the Slovak language I think are easy, and others which I think would be just as difficult as any other language. So first I want to get into what's easy, intermediate, and difficult, and then later on I'm going to talk about what I've been doing to learn and practice Slovak and what maybe you can do too. Alright, so first I'd like to start off with what is easy with the Slovak language when you're learning it. Now, the Slovak language, it is a Latin-based language, or it's written using the Latin alphabet. So right out of the gate, if you are a native English speaker or you're coming from another language that uses the Latin alphabet, that right off the bat is easy to understand. Now, something to add to the Slovak alphabet are the diacritics. Now, many other languages that use the Latin script have their own diacritics that change the pronunciation and the sound of certain characters in their alphabets. But I think this is something that's easy with the Slovak alphabet. You can learn the different diacritics and the sounds that they make and how they change the letters in the Slovak alphabet. I think you can learn that within a day. There are materials that you can find online, some books. I'll mention some things by the end of the video, but there are resources out there that you can find, and if you go onto YouTube and type in the Slovak alphabet pronounced or something to that effect, you will find videos of people, you know, giving more in-depth explanations of these sounds, but that's something that I think is pretty easy with the Slovak language. Then kind of to add to that, the other easy part I think generally with Slovak is overall pronunciation. Now, that's not to say that some words may be a little more difficult to pronounce, maybe if they are a longer word or they have a consonant cluster in the word, but overall I think Slovak is easy to pronounce because when words are spelt in Slovak, they are pronounced basically exactly how they're written, how they're spelled. So in English, that is often not the case. We have a lot of words where we spell them in one way, but we pronounce them very differently from how they're spelled. But in Slovak, that's not necessarily the case. When you see a word spelled a certain way, and if you know the pronunciation of the individual letters, then it's going to be very easy to pronounce Slovak words. Okay, now what is intermediate or kind of easy, kind of difficult to learn with Slovak? Now, I would say that would probably have to be the vocabulary, and that's going to be with any language. Learning the vocabulary, that's just something that's going to take some time. I heard somewhere online that, you know, to really absorb a word in a new language, you're going to have to hear it and even use it 20 times first before you really truly absorb it and it becomes a part of your vocabulary and you don't really have to think too much when using a word. So that's where something like using flashcards will come in handy. Maybe if you have a buddy or a friend that you can practice a language with, like there are websites where you can find people to practice with. Again, I will mention these things at the end of the video, but if you have someone that you can practice with, or if they can teach you maybe in a conversational way, that's a really great way to practice your vocabulary. So that's something that I would say is on kind of an intermediate level with learning, but that's not really unique to Slovak. That's going to go with any language, is learning vocabulary. Okay, now to get on with what is difficult when learning the Slovak language, because this is what a lot of people online are saying. They're saying, oh, Slovak is such a difficult language, and yes, it is difficult, but it's not the most difficult language to learn, in my opinion. I mean, it's a challenge, yes, but and it's going to take time. But is it the most difficult language? I wouldn't say so, but what makes it difficult to master is the grammar, because there are a lot of grammar rules, a lot of different cases, and let me just explain a little bit some of the systems that Slovak is using. So first off, what I would like to mention is that the Slovak language makes use of the gender system, so masculine, feminine, and neutral. So that's, you know, maybe similar to Spanish, but in English we don't really use it so much. So that's something to be aware of. So every noun or, you know, every word basically will have like an assigned gender to it. So it may be considered to be masculine, feminine, or neutral. And so what that also means is that when you are using, you know, like let's say like a feminine word in a sentence and it's like the subject of the sentence, then the rest of the sentence has to change around that to accommodate it. So a couple of the other words in the sentence that you're using will have to become feminine as well, because the subject you're talking about is feminine, so you need to address it in the feminine form. So that's one thing. Then there are also 6 different grammar cases, if I'm not mistaken, and I have them listed here, so I'm just going to read them off to you. So the 6 different grammar cases in Slovak are the nominative case, accusative case, genitive case, dative case, locative case, and instrumental. Now, I can't really give a full in-depth, you know, analysis on when it's most appropriate to use these different cases and how they're going to change the words that you're using. That might be for another video someday, but I'm not an expert in the Slovak language. I am learning it. It is my second language. I'm a native English speaker, so there are other channels for more in-depth lessons with Slovak, but those are the 6 different cases in the Slovak language. So that means that you can have like one word, so let's say like žena, and then depending on if it's singular or plural, and depending also on the case, it's gonna have many different forms. So I think in theory that might be like up to 12 different forms, but I don't think it's quite 12. I'm gonna have like a little graph next to me to show you what I'm talking about. But the point that I'm trying to make is that there's, you know, you might have like the base version of a word, but then there's all these other forms of the word depending on the case and like the situation. So it's a lot to be aware of. The thing that I want to mention with all these different cases is, yes, when you're learning this language, it is important to be aware of them from the start, but I would say to not really stress or put so much emphasis on like getting them perfect right away. I think it's more important to first off, like to get the pronunciation of words, like first and foremost, but then after that, spend most of your time just learning vocabulary and just general comprehension. Like if you can listen to the language and understand it to a certain degree, or if you can read it to a certain degree, that's really, really good too. There's this language learning like idea that's been floating around that I've noticed lately called comprehensible input. Basically kind of meaning like the amount of a language that you can comprehend when you're listening to it. So I can go further in depth in this on another video, but basically it's like the more that you can understand when you listen to a language, and if you just keep listening to a language, even if you don't understand everything, that you will start to accumulate it or acclimate it or absorb it, something to that effect. So I would say grammar is the most difficult, but it's not something that I think you need to get too stressed out about, because when you're speaking Slovak with native Slovak speakers, I think they're going to be very understanding. They've been very understanding with me when I speak my broken Slovak, so don't stress about it. They will find it, you know, charming or endearing that you are taking the time and effort to learn their language. I also think it's very important to have both an interest in learning the language and a reason. And you can say that for just about any language or maybe any other interest in general. I would say it's more important to have an interest in the language, and a reason is good as well. That's good, but at least have an interest. Now with a reason, you know, reasons could be maybe you moved to Slovakia, or maybe you are working with Slovak people, or maybe you want to talk to your Slovak family, or maybe you have some Slovak friends that you want to try to impress. Those could be reasons. But maybe you don't have any direct reasons now. Maybe you're curious about, you know, the people, language, culture, etc. Then you should at least have an interest in learning it. Because if you have an interest in learning the language, then you are more likely to, you know, spend the time in learning it and to be dedicated in learning it and be consistent. Because with language learning and with, you know, just about any skill, you need to be consistent and dedicated. So it's better to practice something 20 minutes a day every day rather than 3 hours on Saturday. So it is something that has to become a part of your lifestyle. Okay, so maybe you've decided to learn the Slovak language and you'd like some resources. So in my time of learning the language, I have found some good resources. And I would say that first, it's really good to just hear and listen to the language. And so first, I'd like to recommend 2 YouTube channels for that. So the first YouTube channel is going to be Learn Slovak with Stories. Now, this is a great YouTube channel. I don't think that the woman who runs this channel is very active with the channel currently, but she has still a ton of material on her channel. So what she does is she speaks Slovak very slowly. So you do need to learn a bit of the language first to be able to understand what she's saying, but she's speaking very simply, very slowly. Oftentimes is reading, you know, simple fairy tales or children's stories. Other times she is showing you parts of Bratislava and talking about, you know, what we are seeing in the photos that she's presenting. And sometimes she does other things, like maybe she's cooking or something like that. But the point is that she's speaking very slowly, very clearly, and very simply. And so that is great for someone who is learning the language from scratch, and maybe you're not an expert at it. The second channel that I would like to recommend is one called Slovak Girl. This one I found very recently, but it's good for kind of more standard and brief lessons. So she has like normal YouTube videos and YouTube shorts, and is giving everything from grammar lessons to vocabulary. And usually the videos are pretty short, so if you just want something that's like just straight to the point and is very, you know, brief, but it's like the, you know, core concepts and core words and things like that, then Slovak Girl is a good channel for that. If you're more interested in audio only, like just listening, then a podcast that I can recommend is called Learn Slovak and More by Božena Hilko. In this podcast, so I've listened to it a little bit when I take the train. In this podcast, this lady, she's speaking in English. I believe she currently lives in the United States, so she's Slovak born, living in the States. She's kind of giving lessons like at the end of her podcast and kind of telling random stories or talking about random like Slovak culture and history and whatnot. So you get a little bit of like history and culture in English, and then towards the end of the lesson, she's kind of teaching you new words and phrases. So it's kind of, it's very casual. It's not like super in-depth lessons, but she kind of will repeat some of the phrases. So you're supposed to, you know, repeat along with her. But that can be good if you just want something that's more a listening experience. Then for my final 2 recommendations, they are going to be 2 books. Now the first book is called A Grammar of Contemporary Slovak by Jozef Mistrík. And I think this book was written in the 80s, if I remember correctly. It's not like the newest book, but it does not need to be. I started to read it, and it is very detailed. It's almost like a textbook, and it lays things out very plainly. It talks about very, you know, these very detailed, like specific rules and all these little nuances with the language. And again, I can't say more other than it's very detailed and really gets into the nitty-gritty. So if you're someone who is more interested in reading kind of a textbook style book, then A Grammar of Contemporary Slovak would be the book for you. It is very good. I highly recommend it. Then the last book that I'm going to recommend, it is not specific to Slovak at all. It's actually is a general language learning book. And if you're into language learning and watch YouTube videos about languages and language learning, then you've probably already heard of the channel. I think it's called Ikenna, or at least that's the guy's name. So he has a book that is supposed to give you strategies on learning languages, and it's called Fluency Made Easy by Ikenna is his name. And I actually haven't finished this book. I kind of started it a long time ago and didn't get so far in it at the time, but I'm going to start reading it now. It's something that if you really wanted to, you could finish it like, you know, in maybe like an hour or a couple hours. It's only, I think, 70 pages, so, you know, maybe a couple hours. But it gives you all these different strategies for how to absorb a language. So like different listening strategies, like, you know, what to listen to, how often. There's more strategies in that book that he talks about. I haven't read the whole thing yet. It's kind of, some things are obvious in it, but it is still a valuable book to take advantage of if you're interested in learning a language. So that's about all I have for today. If you enjoyed this video or got something useful out of it, please let me know down in the comments section below. And if you want to see more videos like this and about Slovakia and Bratislava in general, then feel free to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel for more. So I'll see you in the next one. I'm out. Later.